What's going on YouTube? Bacon here bringing another video. This one going to be my week 6 battle for the OLT Harmony Division Season 5. This week we are taking on ManlySoap, coach of the Auburn Doublades. Both of us are coming into this game at 4-1, so potentially a very big game here for playoff seeding. One more win and I think we're either guaranteed or practically guaranteed a playoff spot at this point, because I think the 8th place team does have 3 losses right now if I'm not mistaken. So and only an 8-week season, of course. So definitely a very, very important game for us to win here. Potentially a playoff matchup going forward, but I wasn't going to hold anything back this game. I really felt like I needed to bring a solid team and pick up a W, and a very scary matchup here for me on paper against a very good player in Soap. So yeah, let's get right into the build here. So on my opponent's team, they have the Melo-P Pirouette, Necrozma, Greninja, Thundurus, Sylveon, Gligar, Empoleon, Amoonguss, Druddigon, Typhlosion, and Frostlass. So I hate prepping for Melo-P Pirouette. That mon is just broken. It should not be allowed in anything. Like, you can say, Mark, you have a Cofagrigus. What do you care? But like, Melo-P Pirouette gets knockoff, gets Shadow Claw, gets U-turn. Like, he can take advantage of my Cofagrigus pretty heavily in this match. And like, it's kind of my obvious switch into the Melo-P. So like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, yeah, it's normal and fighting type, so I resist its dual stab, or I'm immune to its dual stab. Great, but like, if it U-turns out into his Greninja, for example, I gotta basically pick a sack, because going further with this, I have like no switches to Greninja on my team. My fairy type is a rock type, so obviously that's not gonna work out. Like, Dragonite can get hit by an Ice Beam, Celebi's weak to dark, like, and U-turn for that matter. Crocodile is weak to water. Like, all my resists to dark are weak to water, and my water resists are at the best like neutral to dark, like the Volcanion, for example. So the Greninja is incredibly scary versus me, especially because I didn't bring my Toxicroak. He could be carrying extra sensory for Toxicroak, but I don't really anticipate that necessarily. I think he'd definitely have Hydro Pump, Dark Pulse, Ice Beam, and then his last move would be something like U-turn or maybe a Hazard, something like that. He could be carrying extra sensory, like, I can't rule that out, but yeah, just really not good switches to Greninja on my team. It outspeeds my whole team as well, so very, very threatening mod for me to deal with. The Melo-P is incredibly threatening to deal with. Like, something that fast and hits that hard should not be that bulky. That mon's just stupid. So I never want to see that thing again. I have to face it in SSBL. You guys will see that game coming up fairly shortly. But yeah, just a terribly difficult mon to prep for in general, and I would be perfectly content to never ever see it again in another league. So, yeah. What else on his team? The Thundurus is also pretty threatening, but I do have a Rotom Heat to help deal with that. Crocodile also, of course, is immune to electric type stab, so and my Diancie, if I had brought it, would have been able to live a hit from full. My Dragonite can live a hit from full, though. If my multi-scale is intact, I do live Life Orb HP Ice, or Choice Specs HP Ice, I believe, from the Thundurus, so that's something to note as well. Defensively, I felt like he kind of had to bring his Empoleon so that he had a good switch into my Mega Diancie. Even Earth Power is not doing a ton to like a Spadef variant of Empoleon, but I didn't feel like Mega Diancie made a whole lot of sense this week with things like the Greninja running around, the Melo-P, Empoleon, Amoonguss. Like, I just didn't think Mega Diancie had a very good matchup this game, so I elected not to bring it. But let's get right into my team build here and take a look at what I brought. First off here is Rotom Heat, Hotbox the Rotom Heat running Overheat, Volt Switch, Will-O-Wisp, and Defog. Pretty standard Rotom Heat set from what I've been running this season. Max Spadef, or pretty close to Max Spadef, tiny bit into speed investment, just to make sure I'm creeping his Gligar potentially on that end. So yeah, the main idea from the Rotom Heat here is to switch into his Thundurus repeatedly. Best thing he can do pretty much is hit me with Focus Blast, but if I'm in on like his Dragonite, he might be clicking HP Ice. If I'm in with Dragonite, he might be clicking HP Ice. If I'm in with Volcanion, he might be clicking Thunderbolt. Like, Rotom Heat's a pretty decent switch into the Thundurus over the course of the match. I opted for leftovers over like a Super Berry in this instance, just because I felt like I'd be switching him pretty repeatedly and potentially on things like U-turn. So I wanted to maximize the amount of leftovers recovery that I'm going to get from the Rotom Heat. I felt like I'd be on the field for a good bit of this game, so I think leftovers made the most sense in general. You can also take some hits from things like Sylveon, Amoonguss, assuming he's not sporing me, and the Typhlosion as well, and the Frostlass if he happened to bring those. Those were kind of like peripheral picks for him in this game, but if they did happen to show up, the Rotom Heat would do pretty well against those as well. Next up here is Take Kyle the Volcanion, running, once again, Choice Specs Volcanion with Fire Blast, Steam Eruption, Sludge Bomb, and Flamethrower. running modest max special attack Volcanion. I've got enough speed in here to creep a Gligar running, I can't remember if it was no speed investment or not a ton of speed investment, essentially, because I wanted to make sure I'm outspeeding that thing and be able to throw off Steam Eruptions versus team. He really doesn't have very good switch-ins for Volcanion on his team. Obviously, his Empoleon being a steel type with secondary typing means he's not going to take Fire Blast very nicely. Fire Blast should 2-hit KO, I think, every variant of Empoleon, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not like Assault Vest, if he decided to run some crazy set like that, but clicking Choice Specs Fire Blast is pretty much going to snag me some KOs this matchup unless he brings like an Assault Vest Empoleon or Assault Vest Druddigon or something like that. Volcanion is going to do a ton of work on this team because I did it, like I mentioned, expect the Greninja, but Greninja is not a very good switch into Volcanion. It's taking like over 75%, I think, from a Steam Eruption or a Fire Blast, so going to be able to put in the hurt on his team. If I can get this in on Empoleon, Gligar, Amoonguss, things like that, I can just fire off some really strong hits versus team. I can also take hits from things like the Meloetta, the Necrozma, things like that. Obviously, I've got to watch out for the Thundurus, but it's pretty easy in general for me to get my Volcanion in this game. Slow Volt switches out of Rotom Heat come in on some of his weaker kind of setup type mons, or not setup mons, support mons, things like Empoleon, things like Gligar, if it's not going for Earthquake, and I can really just fire off some really strong dual stab versus team, hit him incredibly hard. Sludge Bomb was there just to hit things like the Sylveon, or specifically the Sylveon, I guess, and then potentially to snag a poison on something like Druddigon if he happened to bring that. But I felt like the Volcanion just had a really good matchup here, and I'm just going to try and click buttons with it this game. If I can get this thing in repeatedly, he's basically got to pick him on every time it comes out on something that is not threatened by it. Next up here is Dexter the Ambipom, once again running Silk Scarf Ambipom with Fake Out, Return, Low Kick, and Knockoff. Knockoff, I felt like was kind of the best fourth move in this instance, just because it hits the Necrozma fairly hard. Obviously, I do have to watch out for like a weakness policy set of Necrozma, but that's something that I could kind of deal with in due time. And just in case he brought the Frostlass, like I didn't want to be completely walled by the Frostlass. Obviously, other than that, I'm just running normal and fighting type moves. So I felt like Knockoff was still good in this game. Remove items from his team, things switching in on me like the Sylveon isn't going to appreciate Knockoff, especially because Return is still doing a ton to it afterwards. If I can remove potential leftovers on that thing, that's really nice. I can remove Eviolite from his Gligar, remove any kind of item from the Amoonguss is nice, and then just fire off normal stab versus team. If he doesn't bring the Frostlass, just clicking Return is fairly free versus team because I am carrying Low Kick for the Empoleon, and Return's going to do a good number to some of his more offensive mons, things like Thundurus. Really don't appreciate taking Fake Out into Return. It's actually going to kill Thundurus from full. And Fake Out's just nice to pressure things like his Greninja, his Meloetta. If they're chipped down, I can force some switches with my Ambipom and get off some big damage versus team. Next up here is Nixon the Crocodile, running Choice Scarf Crocodile with Moxie this time, Earthquake, Knockoff, Crunch, and Superpower. Running Jolly Max Attack, just enough speed, I believe, to creep the Meloetta. Scarf Superpower is a decent way for me to win this game. Obviously, his Meloetta and his Greninja outspeed my entire team, but they're both obviously weak to Superpower. Funnily enough, Meloetta does not die to a Superpower. I think it does like 77 to 90% if he's completely uninvested in HP. Like I said, something that's that fast and hits that hard should drop to a base 120 power. Super effective move coming off a Crocodile. Like, I don't know. That mod is just bulky as all hell. It's ridiculous. Anyways, Crocodile is really important here as an offensive check to the Greninja, offensive check to the Meloetta, the Thundurus as well to some extent. Even though Crunch isn't doing a ton to that thing, I felt like it was still nice to have here with the dual Dark Stab, just in case he was running like a Z move on his Thundurus. I still wanted to be able to hit it hard enough to KO it with Crunch from whatever range it's at that point in the game. And Crunch is going to do a little bit more to things like the Necrozma as well if he's running a Z move on that thing. There's potential for a late game Superpower sweep, like I mentioned, if he's just down to things like the Meloetta, the Greninja, and then like a weakened resist, something like a Thundurus. I felt like Scarf Superpower was a decent end game to play for because I felt like he'd keep his Meloetta and his Greninja pretty healthy over the course of the match. He'll switch him out on things like my Ambipom's Fake Out, let some of his more defensive mons take the damage off, and if I can remove things like his Gligar from play, my Crocodile is really going to have kind of a field day with some of his more offensive threats. And as you can see, he didn't bring the Sylveon, but very glad to not see that. Fizdef Sylveon could have kind of shut down Crocodile, but at the same time, it would have allowed in my Volcanion and my Rotom Heat for free. So I was willing to take that trade in the team builder here just to have a good offensive check to his Greninja and his Melo-P, because that was super, super important for me this game. Next up here is Glader the Dragonite, running Flying Z Dragonite, Dragon Dance, Fly, Dragon Claw, and Earthquake. I felt like these three moves were kind of the best coverage for his team. Obviously, I am lacking extreme speed, so if I'm not boosted, I can't really do much to help with the Greninja or the Melo-P. But at the very least, with my multi-scale intact, I am going to live an Ice-type move from either one of them. I can't remember if I dropped to Choice Specs Ice Beam from Greninja, but I think if he's not running Choice Specs, I should live an Ice Beam, if I'm not mistaken, and I feel like he'd prioritize just kind of breaking my multi-scale with the U-turn or something like that anyways. And if I can get Dragonite to +1, I should be able to break through a hole in his team. Earthquake is there to hit the Empoleon. Z-Fly just nukes his team besides the Empoleon really hard. And Dragon Claw is just a really nice spammable neutral stab versus team. I didn't want to bring Outrage in this instance just because there is, of course, the potential for the Sylveon to come. And I don't really want to be locked into Outrage against things like Empoleon and then Scarf variants of like Greninja, for example. Being locked in with my Dragonite is not necessarily the best thing for me, but +1 Z-Fly does nuke his Sylveon. Does a ton of damage to his Necrozma if he's not running like a physically defensive type set, and should kind of blow away everything else on his team that doesn't resist it. Obviously, you're not really going to want to bring in Thundurus on a +1 Dragonite anyways, and that should still take like 75% for a +1 Z-Fly. So Dragonite, I think, can poke a hole in his team, and that's exactly what I need it to do. I don't need it to sweep this game, and I've kind of rarely used Dragonite as a sweeper this season. I've rarely used it at all, for that matter. But I think it's much better as a breaker in most capacities here, and definitely in this matchup, I felt like as an early game kind of breaker, Dragonite really was good in this match, but as a late game cleaner, it really wasn't going to do a whole lot. So I felt like it would be good to get this set up as early as possible. I think I live any single hit from pretty much everything on his team, and I should be able to get off a +1 Z-Fly and just nuke something on his squad. So that's the Dragonite set this game, hoping it can kind of poke that hole and open the door for something like my Crocodile later in the match. And last up here, we've got Sarcophagus the Cofagrigus, running Cobra Berry Cofagrigus with Calm Mind, Shadow Ball, HP Fighting, and Pain Split. This is kind of a weird Cofagrigus set. I am mixed defensive, so I've got enough HP and Spadef investment that I believe I can live. If I go +1 on a switch into like Greninja, I believe I can live 2 Dark Pulses with my Cobra Berry intact. It was some kind of weird investment like that on the mixed defensive there. The Fizdef investment is obviously to help me take on the Melo-P a little bit better. Cobra Berry will also help me take a knockoff a little bit better from that thing. If he's running Shadow Claw, he's running Shadow Claw, but I felt like knockoff was better versus my team in general. Pain Split is just to keep me healthy over the course of the match. It was either that or rest, basically, but I felt like Pain Split was better because I didn't want to go to sleep and then not have sleep talk. And at the same time, if I do get toxic or something like that, and I start to get whittled down, at least I can use Pain Split to get some HP back and start to reduce the HP of some of my opponent's Pokemon. Things like Sylveon have a massive base HP stat that I can help take advantage of with Pain Split. And if I can Calm Mind up a couple times in this game, Cofagrigus can really start putting in work. I believe +2 HP Fighting knocks out the Greninja. Don't quote me on that. I can't really remember because I'm not running any special attack investment. But the +2 HP Fighting is there basically for the Melo-P and the Greninja, and Shadow Ball hits everything else on his team. I can Calm Mind up in front of Sylveon, start Pain Splitting up health on that thing, and really become a little bit of a problem for his team. But like I said, this thing's primary job is to switch in on the Melo-P. Like I mentioned, he could be carrying U-turn and could really take advantage of that by U-turning out into Greninja. You can see my team really does not have a lot to deal with Greninja. So I'm going to have to be really careful about when I bring this Cofagrigus in on the Melo-P. I would prefer to bring it in on like a free switch. If it knocks something out, I could bring it into my Cofagrigus and just start clicking Calm Mind. Not really sure if that's going to be the case in this game, but that's kind of the idea behind the Cofagrigus. It's not necessarily going to have to come in every time on the Melo-P unless I have a really good read on a normal or fighting type move. But if I need it in the end, at least it'll be there to help check the Melo-P late game. So that's the Cofagrigus set. That's the team for this week. Like I mentioned, very difficult matchup here just between the Melo-P and the Greninja alone, but let's get right into what he brought here and what I'm looking at for leads. So he brought the Greninja, Melo-P, Gligar, Empoleon, Thundurus, and Necrozma. pretty close to what I expected. I'm very glad to not see the Sylveon, as I mentioned. Like, FizzDef Sylveon would have been very problematic for my Crocodile. This makes Superpower a little bit more free for me to click. Like, obviously, he's got 3 fighting type resists with the Gligar, Thundurus, and Necrozma. But if I can use my Dragonite to break through one of his kind of defensive mons, like Gligar or the Necrozma, that could really, really open up a door for things like my Crocodile in the back. So, that's kind of my game plan going into this game, and like I mentioned, I don't think anything on his team KOs my Dragonite from full, and I don't want to kind of play the game of what happens if he gets rocks up and my multi-scale is broken. So what I'm actually going to do here is just right off the rip go full Dawn mode here and lead with my Dragonite and just click Dragon Dance. Like, there's not a whole lot he can do to threaten me, and I don't anticipate that he'd be running a Choice Scarfer this week. If he is running a Choice Scarfer, it would be this Thundurus. But I'm going to risk it. Like, I don't think this is Choice Scarf Thundurus, and I'm just going to click Dragon Dance this turn. I don't care if he HP Ices. I don't care what he does. He kind of has to fear weakness policy, too. Like, he can't just HP Ice me if I'm Dragon Dance weakness policy, because if I've got extreme speed, that would be hugely problematic for him. So, I'm just going to Dragon Dance, as I said. He goes out into the Necrozma. I'm pretty sure this thing can't knock me out, but I'm also pretty sure that I'm going to knock it out with a Z-Fly here, so that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to go right for my Z move here off the rip and do some big damage to this Necrozma. It turns out that he's actually running a lot of bulk on his Necrozma, so he is going to be able to live this Supersonic Sky Strike. If I were Adamant, I might have KO'd. I'm not really sure, but maybe I should have gone +2 there because I knew I wouldn't get knocked out, but, you know, that's fine. Gonna get some big damage off on this Necrozma. Couldn't risk him being like Z-Photon Geyser or something weird like that and knocking me out. So here's an interesting play because Earthquake is kind of free for me. Like, I'll knock out the Necrozma with Earthquake, and obviously he doesn't want to be switching in his more frail offensive type mons on me. But I really felt like he was just gonna sack off the Necrozma at that point, or if he wasn't gonna sack off the Necrozma, he would go Gligar to try and preserve his mons, health on his mons. I really didn't think he would go Empoleon because I was anticipating this Empoleon to be Shikaberry to help deal with my Diancie and help deal with my Dragonite. So I really wasn't anticipating that he would risk bringing it on an Earthquake, because if I pop his Shikaberry with my first Earthquake, I'm going to KO him with the next one, and then he's going to sack essentially 2 mons to Dragonite when he could just sack 1. So I really didn't think he was going to switch out of his Necrozma in the first place, and like I said, if he did switch out, I really thought he was going to go Gligar. So what I elected to do this turn was cook Dragon Claw. That turns out to be the wrong move, unfortunately, as the Empoleon does come in, but chip damage on the Empoleon is still good here. It's one of those things that's going to live a hit from my Volcanion, even though it won't appreciate it, but now with this Earthquake damage off, Dragonite, even though it didn't pick up any kills this match, essentially killed 2 Pokemon. Like, the Empoleon's basically out of the way, and the Necrozma is basically out of the way. Neither of those things can really heal up versus my team anyway, so, yeah. Dragonite does a really good job there. Not totally breaking through mons, but essentially breaking through mons. 2 very more kind of defensive components to his team. So I'm just going to go out into Volcanion here and click Steam Eruption. It's kind of my best overall play. It's going to knock out this Empoleon, and it's going to knock out anything that he wants to bring in on me. So Steam Eruption does some really good damage there. Obviously it deters the Meloetta from coming in. Thundurus can obviously come out, though. I do have my Rotom Heat at full health in the back here. Like I mentioned, pretty much max Bidef Rotom Heat here to take on this Thundurus specifically, as he rips off a Focus Blast here, probably predicting my Crocodile to come in, or I guess I hit the Rotom Heat harder than anything else he was going to go for there anyways. So good play on his part. Lands a Focus Blast, does some good damage to my Rotom Heat, but I'm just going to click Volt Switch this turn. I don't care if he goes out into Gligar, because 1, I get a little bit more leftovers recovery if he does, and 2, I can get a burn off on that Gligar, which will be really, really nice for things like my Volcanion, meaning that it can take Earthquake really, really well from this Gligar, and kind of go from there later in the game. I do anticipate that he'd be running a very, very defensive variant of Gligar, so it's very possible that my Volcanion will outspeed it as well. So, like I mentioned, getting a burn off on the Gligar here is very valuable to me, getting some chip damage off on it over the course of the match, and also, of course, like I mentioned, weakening its Earthquake output. So, he's going to go for Stealth Rocks here. I'm getting a good bit of recovery here on my Rotom Heat. And I can just click Defog this turn. I don't care what he wants to go for. Getting rid of the Stealth Rocks is kind of a high priority for me here with my Rotom and my Volcanion running around. So, gonna Defog here. Get rid of those Stealth Rocks as my opponent goes for Toxic. So, being Toxic on my Rotom Heat's not great, but I can still take a hit from the Thunderous, which means if the Thunderous does want to knock me out, it's going to have to take 2 Life Orb chips. And any damage on the Thunderous at this point is good. I believe it's already in range of Scarf Crunch. I'm not certain from my Crocodile, but any chip damage on the Thunderous is good to potentially open up a Scarf Superpower sweep later in the game. So my opponent makes a very nice play here. Goes for the double Toxic as I go out into my Volcanion. Like I mentioned, with this Gligar being burned, Volcanion's pretty free to bring in on it. Earthquakes shouldn't be doing too much to me anyways. And I can just click Steam Eruption this turn, claim another KO as he does sack off his Necrozma here. So Volcanion essentially taking the 2 KOs that Dragonite earned, but what are you going to do? Volcanion comes out here, picks up a couple Mons, and like I mentioned, it's really hugely threatening for his team, and as long as that Gligar's alive, I can continuously get this thing in on that Gligar, and I am at a reasonable amount of HP where I can take a hit from the Greninja or from the Meloetta on like a free switch kind of scenario. So definitely going to preserve my Volcanion here. Like I mentioned, the Rotom Heat is really only here for the Thunderous anyway, so I'm going to go out into that once again as he goes for Thunderbolt this time, predicting me to stay in, predicting a Focus Blast potentially, I think was what he was thinking there. But that's great because now he's still going to need 2 more hits to knock out my Rotom Heat, and you can see that Thunderous is starting to get very low off Life Orb chip. So here I'm just going to click Overheat with my Rotom Heat because I want to pressure his Gligar to Roost. What this does is if he doesn't Roost this turn as I go Volcanion, Gligar is not a good check to my Crocodile anymore. And if he does Roost here as I get in my Volcanion, I'm going to pick up another KO with Steam Eruption. So either way, this is a win-win for me this turn. I'm going to go out to my Volcanion here as he predicts me to do that and goes for Earthquake. So my opponent's making some really, really good predictions on my Volcanion coming in, but it's not really mattering because like I mentioned, getting that burn off on Gligar was huge to make it not a threat to my Volcanion. So once again, Steam Eruption's pretty much going to pick up a KO here. He can't really switch anything in on it, and I'm going to be able to knock out this Gligar. So Scarf's Superpower Sweep, like I mentioned, was a really good win con for me in this game, and we almost got there. Like, as long as the Meloetta takes a little bit of chip damage, and the Thunderous takes about half the health that it's got left between Life Orb and a little bit of chip from the rest of my Mons, I feel like that's very doable. So I'm just going to sack off my Volcanion here, figure out what his Greninja is. It does turn out to be Life Orb, so I'm glad to see that it's not Scarf at the very least. It means my Crocodile should be the fastest thing on the field because I don't anticipate you'd be running Scarf Meloetta. And here I'm just going to go out into my Crocodile. I have no reason to click anything besides Superpower here. I can't play games with this Greninja because if I lose my Crocodile, I basically just lose to it as long as he plays smart around Fake Outs for my Ambipom. So I'm going to go for Superpower here. As you can see, I get some good chip damage off on this Thunderous. And because I am Moxie, now literally all I need is this Thunderous to click 1 attack, which it pretty much has to this turn. And 2, I need to get like 20% off on the Meloetta, which is 1 HP fighting from my Cfagrigus. It's a Fake Out from my Ambipom. It's pretty much whatever to set up for that Scarf Superpower Sweep. Because I am Moxie, I will keep boosting my attack as I drop it with Superpower as long as I'm picking up KOs. So like I mentioned, really was trying to set up from that. Basically from the beginning of this game, I felt like that was kind of my best win con in this game. And then Rotom Heat here, taking a ton of hits off this. Like, Rotom Heat didn't physically do any damage to this Thunderous, but it hit, I believe the Thunderous hit me 4 times. It was a U-turn, Focus Blast, Thunderbolt, and that Focus Blast. So yeah, this Thunderous hit my Rotom Heat 4 times. So it essentially did 40% to this Thunderous, and pretty much neutered the Gligar in this game. So Rotom Heat did a really, really good job this match. Again, another Mon that even though it didn't pick up any KOs, was extremely impactful in this match. So like I mentioned, now the Thunderous is in range of Scarf Superpower. The Meloetta is the only thing I need chip damage on at this point. So what I'm actually going to do here is go out into my Ambipom first. I'm going out to Ambipom instead of Crocodile because, like I mentioned, the Meloetta does live a Scarf Superpower for me, so I'd rather go into Ambipom, kind of force in the Meloetta to get some chip damage off on it with something like my Cfagrigus. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm perfectly content to sack off my Ambipom, predicting him either to knock me out with a Fighting type move. That's fine, you can knock me out. What I really don't want here is him predicting my Cfagrigus and getting in his Greninja on a U-turn. Alternatively, if he's got like Toxic or something, I also don't want that to happen. Like if he's Subtoxic Meloetta to deal with my Cfagrigus, I don't want that happening either. So I think my best overall play here is just to stay in with Ambipom. If he knocks me out, he knocks me out. If he does do that, I can go out into my Cfagrigus, set up a Calm Mind, and with my Cobra Berry intact, like I mentioned, I should live 2 Dark Pulses from his Greninja. So that's kind of the game plan here. I'm going to sack off my Ambipom here and click Return. as we do actually get that play right. My opponent over predicts a little bit, goes for U-turn, and now his Greninja's got to come in on this return, and it is super not going to appreciate it. So this return is going to do a massive chunk of damage to this Greninja, and now he's in range of a Life Orb hit. So Greninja, like I mentioned, was probably the biggest threat to my team, and now it's gone. Like, he's going to knock out my Ambipom, no big deal. The Ambipom's gone. But the Greninja is as well, which basically means as long as his Meloetta doesn't get like some weird freeze turns on my Cofagrigus, I'm golden here. So I'm going to go on Cofagrigus. Like I mentioned, Meloetta does not die from Scarf Superpower. So I'm going to go for Cofagrigus here. Just start spamming HP fighting at him. Like, there's no point in Calm Mining at this point in the game. Thankfully, Mummy is going to get rid of his Serene Grace. So this was kind of like the scary Ice Punch because it has a 20% chance to freeze. The rest of them are only going to have a 10% chance. So just going to go Cofagrigus here and start spamming HP fighting. I don't think I ever calced what kind of damage this was from the Meloetta. I can't remember if he was like Assault Vest or something. The HP fighting seems like it's not doing a lot, but like I mentioned, Meloetta is a very bulky Pokemon, even in this form. And my Cofagrigus has no special attack investment. So thankfully we're not getting frozen here on the Ice Punch, but I really only needed to not get frozen by the first one because I did, like I mentioned, need that HP fighting damage to put it in range of Superpower. So it doesn't matter really if he freezes me at this point. Obviously he's got no way to recover HP off my Cofagrigus or anything like that. So I am able to break through all the freezes there at the end and knock out that Meloetta just by hitting it with a bunch of HP fighting from my Cofagrigus. So very good game to Soap. Very, very difficult matchup like I mentioned. His team is super, super scary. But yeah, very good game. I felt like his predictions were very on point, like with his Gligar, he got the Toxic off on my Volcanion, he hit the Volcanion with an Earthquake, both times when I had my Toxic Rotom Heat in on him, so two very good predictions from him. I think the biggest play in the game ended up being the Meloetta U-turning out on my Ambipom. Perfectly reasonable play from his end because, like, I do have a Cofagrigus right there. It's clearly my response to the Meloetta, so it was a very reasonable play for him to go for U-turn there, but I felt like I lost the game if I let him do that. So I had to stay in with Ambipom there, click return, able to pick up enough damage on the Greninja that it was essentially dead. It was going to die to its next Life Orb hit, and we are able to pick up that 2-0 victory. So very big win for us. We're sitting at 5-1 now. Like I mentioned, I believe guaranteed for playoffs at this point in the season. And we're going to try it and lock up one of those 1 or 2 seeds. For those of you who don't know, the way the playoffs work in OLT is kind of like a staggered bracket. So I believe the seeds 5 through 8 need to play in the quarterfinals round, or the, what was that? It might not be the quarterfinals round. Quarterfinals, semifinals. The first round of playoffs. There's 4 rounds of playoffs. So the 5 through 8 seeds need to play in the first round. The winners of those games play the 3 and 4 seeds. So the 3 and 4 seeds get a first round bye, and the 1 and 2 seeds get 2 byes, kind of. So they go right to the semifinals game, but they're right at the semifinals game playing each other. So like the 1 seed plays the 2 seed, winner goes to finals, others obviously out of luck. But the less games you can play in Pokemon, the less chance for you to get hacked, right? So it is a big benefit if you're the 1 or 2 seed to go right to that game. Obviously, you got to beat the next best player in the league, whether it's the 1 seed or whether it's the 2 seed. You got to beat the next best player in the league in terms of record. But I feel like it's definitely worth shooting for that overall. If we can play 2 games to try and get a championship, that's way better than trying to play 4 games to get a championship. So, especially in a league with this many talented players. So, yeah, thank you guys very much for watching to this point. If you did, hope to see you guys in another video, and I will see you guys next time. Later.